Autistic people are much more likely to accept situations that neurotypical people would not. This might include accepting living in substandard living conditions or even poverty. Because for an autistic person, it may be easier to accept poor conditions than to negotiate sorting out the issues. So let's have a look together at why this might be the case. Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic older adult, and it's my goal to advocate for autistic people by sharing positive information about autism and relating a few of my own stories along the way. In this podcast, I want to break down a few areas of day-to-day life that can be consistent challenges for autistic people. Now, one of the key aspects of autism is how we communicate differently to many people in the world around us. This difference in practice causes many barriers in our day-to-day life, from relationships to advocating for our needs, and plays out in just about every part of life. So first up, let's take a look at employment, as this is an area that can be especially challenging for autistic people. This is borne out in the statistics, with autistic people being one of the most unemployed or underemployed sections of the population. According to the Amaze organisation, in Australia, the unemployment rate of autistic people is 32%, which is more than 3 times the rate for all people with a disability, and more than 6 times the rate of people without a disability. 54% of autistic people have never had a paid job despite possessing skills and qualifications and a strong desire to join the workforce. Furthermore, more than half of the unemployed autistic people who had previously held a paid job have been out of employment for 3 or more years. And 20% of autistic people reported having lost a job due to their autism. Now, these statistics are horrendous and would be unbelievable, except many autistic people can relate in some way to these numbers. In my case, I know that I was never able to achieve employment as a scientist after graduating university, and looking back, I can now understand that as an undiagnosed autistic person at the time, I was unable to successfully navigate the interview process. In other words, I was different and answered interview questions in unexpected ways, and that made interviewers uncomfortable, in spite of my excellent qualifications and ability. And even if we are able to find work that is meaningful, it can be a challenge maintaining that for several reasons. And an important point to note here is the word meaningful. Work should not just be about struggling to survive, but we should be able to work in employment that complements our skills, engages our minds, and supports our values. Even if we can find work that complements our skills and is meaningful, it can be difficult to maintain that due to differences in how we communicate. Employers or workmates may find our tendency to be honest, forthright, or even blunt disconcerting or even threatening, which can lead to misunderstandings, formal warnings, or even the loss of the job. All the while we are doing our best and staying true to our values in doing what we feel is correct. There are many different ways in which we might find ourselves accepting bad outcomes in this environment. For a start, even just working in an environment with other people can be stressful. Needing to communicate with other people all day and having to constantly try to work out other people's modes of hidden communication. Then there is the need to negotiate professional situations within the working environment. Some key examples here might include negotiating a pay rise, seeking a promotion, or self-advocating for working conditions. All of these things can be especially difficult as they require the types of subtleties in communication and understanding of unspoken cues that we find especially difficult. Then, of course, there is the aspect of seeking accommodations as an autistic person within the workplace. Often we might just find it too difficult and just accept a less than ideal working outcome. This may even include working in environments where our colleagues have no understanding of or empathy for people who are different, or even worse, might use labels like autistic as a joke or slur. All these factors would wear down even the most resilient of employees. And for many autistic adults, eventually the dysregulation of existing in these environments becomes too much, and we may even walk away from employment, despite the obvious financial challenges that then result. Housing, and in particular rental housing, can also be a challenge in trying to advocate for our right to live in a safe environment and to get things fixed by the responsible people when necessary. This might be in a rental situation, for instance, where there are issues with the property that it is the landlord's responsibility to fix. The act of negotiating with the landlord or leasing agent might be so stressful for the autistic person that they decide not to, and keep living with situations that are bad. This can be because of the social communication aspects of autism. It might be that the autistic person just does not have the communication skills or confidence to initiate these types of interactions. And when there is pushback from the landlord, for instance, even though they have the responsibility to fix the issue, the autistic person may back down and in some cases then even be apologetic for even raising the issue. Autistic people are pre-programmed to try to please other people, so it runs against our natural instinct to try to push hard to advocate for our own needs, as this might feel like we are asking something unreasonable from the other person. It's not just rental accommodation where these types of challenges might exist. Even owning our own home can bring up many examples where we may accept poor outcomes. A key example here is home maintenance. For me in particular, this has always been a huge obstacle for me. Not so much if I can do that work myself, but more if I need to organise a tradesperson to come and make repairs. In my earlier adult life, I was very fortunate to be able to buy my own home. That was back in the early 1990s when houses cost a lot less. I purchased a very small old weatherboard house in the suburbs, and it was great having my own space. As this was my first experience living independently, I quickly came to realise how much was involved in caring for myself and how much I had relied on my parents for so many things I was unaware of. Now, this did not mean that that support was no longer available, and as I transitioned into living on my own, I continued to have that fantastic support. The biggest thing that I was totally unprepared for in living alone and owning a house was how to navigate building issues as they arose. But again, my dad was, and still is 35 years later, a huge support in that area in helping guide me through that ongoing maintenance and active engaging tradespeople when necessary. Now, my parents have always been travellers and spend the winters on road trips to warmer parts of the country. What I discovered was that this old house had several issues which only popped up in the colder weather, including the fact that my hot water did not flow in winter. So without the confidence to engage tradespeople on my own, and with Dad away, I spent several winters without any hot water and told no one. Now, I suspect that most neurotypical people, even introverted ones, would not have accepted this outcome and have done what was necessary or sought help to get that fixed. But for me, it was just far easier to accept not having hot water than to try and call a plumber to come and fix it. And asking friends for help to sort out this would have just felt too overwhelming. Actually, a slightly humorous footnote to this story is when I tried to resolve the issue for myself, and without going into the full details, ended up with me lying under the house, undoing the hot water copper pipelines. And when nothing came out, blowing into the pipe out of frustration, only then to have a deluge of hot water cascade over me as I tried to reconnect the pipework. Likewise, on a few occasions, when I had a blocked sewer, I accepted the fact that I could not use the toilet in my house over the prospect of trying to engage a plumber to fix it. These are just a few examples of the many occasions where I consistently accepted poor personal outcomes in my living environment. Even now, when I need to engage a tradesperson to come and fix an issue, I find it to be a hugely stressful undertaking. The main difference now, however, is the fact that I acknowledge that it is not just me in the house, so I feel a responsibility to make sure the home environment is functional and safe. But it is still no easier. It can still take me weeks or much longer to pick up the phone to engage a tradesperson. In recent years, we have had to have some major works done as a result of a very large tree falling on the house. Now, the tree itself was for me nowhere near as stressful as having to both find tradespeople, but then having them come onto the property to do the work. This process took many, many months to complete and was extremely stressful. And each trade that came to do the work caused subsequent damage to the property that I'm still dealing with today. And again, not knowing how to deal with these things left me in a constant state of anxiety. Either I did not follow up on the damage caused, which left me to deal with the problems, or I was too forthright in trying to assert what I thought needed to be done, which made communication and subsequent ongoing relationships with these tradespeople strained. I was trying my best, but just was floundering trying to deal with these things in ways that other people would. Medical interactions can also create significant challenges for autistic people, and knowing how to interact with medical professionals can be challenging. Many autistic people have difficulties with interoception, meaning we may find it difficult to describe our symptoms or levels of pain in a way that most doctors find meaningful. This can lead to wrong diagnoses, misdiagnoses, and even the situation where we might not be believed by the doctor. Hopefully this aspect is changing as more medical professionals gain a better understanding of autism and neurodivergence. But all these things may lead to the autistic person avoiding or delaying seeking medical treatment, and obviously this can lead to really bad outcomes as relatively straightforward conditions escalate over time into serious health issues. The worst case here is that these issues compound over time, contributing to early mortality and the fact that many autistic people die before their non-autistic peers. In fact, autistic people have twice the risk of mortality compared to the general population. What makes these challenges even more complex is that autistic people are much more likely to have underlying health conditions than the wider population. Examples of high prevalence in the autistic population include eczema and skin conditions, epilepsy, sleep disorders, obesity, gastrointestinal problems, heart-related problems, food allergies, vision impairment, hearing loss, dental health issues, arthritis, and connective tissue disorders. And we can see that the mental health outcomes for autistic people are also challenging, particularly for autistic people without co-occurring intellectual disability. These may include some of the following: OCD, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, substance misuse, mood disorders, suicide, self-harm, CPTSD, schizophrenia, paranoia, and psychosis. And of course, all the bad outcomes that we are talking about in this podcast loop back around to negatively affect this lifetime mental health journey. Okay, so let's talk about relationships. How does being autistic lead to bad outcomes in relationships? Well, I'm sure any autistic person can probably answer this one as well as I can. Autism means communication differences, and this can mean failing to recognise body language or subtleties of communication in intimate relationships. And this obviously will lead to problems, unless our partners have a very good understanding of us. But not just an understanding, but a willingness to accept our differences. Now that might seem obvious in any relationship, but relationships between autistic and non-autistic people can often experience a disconnect and subsequent disappointment where ours or our partner's needs go unmet. These differences can also include sensory processing challenges, need for routines, emotional regulation, and executive functioning differences, leading to challenges with planning or task initiation, leading to imbalanced workloads in household management. The reality is that autistic adults experience relationship breakdown at higher rates than the wider population. With neurodiverse marriages, that is, marriages between autistic and non-autistic partners, having an 80% higher divorce rate than marriages where both people are neurotypical. Although interestingly, marriages between couples where both people are autistic are actually 10% less likely to end in divorce. The other side to this is the autistic experience of trying to find that one special person to spend our lives with. Especially if we are undiagnosed, we might have lots of experience of relationships ending in what seems to be baffling circumstances. I know for me, I had several relationships with people before meeting Trish that ended in circumstances that I can now see were influenced by the differences in how I communicated. Not just as an autistic person, but at the time as an undiagnosed autistic person. I had no concept of what I was doing wrong. And for many autistic people, this is quite literally a heartbreaking reality, leading to marriage rates in autistic people of approximately 5% compared to 50% in the wider population. Another point to add in here is that autistic people, especially women, experience rates of abuse at much higher rates than the neurotypical population. And of course, autistic people are at a significantly higher risk of being bullied right across the lifespan. This is a common experience for autistic children in schools, but sadly also a common experience of autistic people in the workplace. In children, this can lead to outcomes such as school absenteeism and educational disruptions or leaving the education system altogether. This obviously creates employment challenges for autistic adults whose education was left incomplete due to factors such as bullying. And of course, bullying in the workplace may lead to the autistic person swapping between jobs or even leaving employment altogether, again leading to poor economic outcomes. And these poor economic outcomes compound as we get older, especially as autistic people may have fewer supports due to a lifetime of social challenges or isolation. I think very many autistic people have learned to be self-sufficient. This can look like we don't need support, but the truth is quite the opposite. We learn to do things for ourselves because we need to have those things done our way, or in ways that fit our routines. This can lead others to think we don't need or want support, with possible isolation as the result. The truth is we do need support, but not just any support. The support we need has to fit our sensory needs and routines, or we will not be able to accept it. Put simply, we are more likely to live an austere lifestyle where we are forced to accept conditions or outcomes that the mainstream population would reject. Now, personally, this more austere life is just what I'm used to, but what I've had to come to understand is that now I am living in relationship, is that while I might accept lesser outcomes for myself, I now have a responsibility to Trish to not force her to accept those bad outcomes. This can be challenging, as I often find it easier to accept those things rather than to do something about it. For example, I can't expect Trish to live in a house with plumbing that does not work because it is hard for me to engage a plumber to come and fix the issue. I need to accept that sometimes I need to put myself in the uncomfortable position of sorting these things out because I care about the person I live with more than the discomfort of doing that task. An area that autistic people can find especially challenging is when it comes to communicating our needs. Autism makes communication in general more difficult than for the neurotypical population, but this can be even more extreme when the communication is important. One aspect of autism is fawning, which in very basic terms is trying to fit in so as not to cause a fuss. In other words, we're much more likely to put the needs or even the perceived needs of others before our own. Now, at one level, putting others' needs before our own might be considered a positive human trait, but for the autistic person, this also means not getting our own needs met, dysregulation, and even severe personal discomfort. This can happen in many ways in our day-to-day lives, but sometimes the effects can be significant. An example of this happened for me this week. I had a plumber here fixing our toilet. Yes, back to plumbing. Now, I noticed as he put everything back together that he did something that did not look quite right to me. Internally, I was torn between saying something or staying quiet, as he is the expert. Now, as it transpired, I did not say anything as I did not want to cause a fuss. What this then meant for me was a sleepless night, worrying about the significant implications of leaving that item unattended to. This also included a 3 a.m. meltdown while trying not to wake Trish. Now, in this case, by not being able to communicate in that moment with the plumber, I caused myself extreme stress for an extended period of time. Now, in some ways, this is a trivial example, but I think many autistic people have these types of instances often in our daily lives, leading to stress, anxiety, and a myriad of other health problems as our bodies try to manage these stress responses on a regular, if not daily basis. All of these factors contribute to autistic people consistently having a lower overall quality of life than the wider population. A further key point here is that many of these factors may stay deeply hidden to the outside observer. Many autistic people appear to be and are in fact extremely capable, but many of us will be living with these types of challenges even though they may be invisible to all but our closest companions. And this is why autism is described as a hidden disability. As autistic people, we might accept living with these poor outcomes, as the path to resolving them or even improving our situation may be beyond what we have the capacity to deal with. But let's be clear, this does not make these outcomes preferable, acceptable, or even tolerable. This is a situation of last resort for autistic people, and is clear evidence that all autistic people need support, regardless of how capable we may appear or how intelligent we might be. Okay, so that's it for now. Do you agree that autistic people have worse life outcomes leading to a lower quality of life? Feel free to add your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. And as always, please like, share and subscribe for more ramblings from an older autistic guy. So until next time, bye for now.